This is Seth David for schoolofbookkeeping.com, bringing to you another special screencast. This time we're talking about using macros in Microsoft Excel to format reports from QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online reports don't necessarily export that well. And by that I mean we don't love the format. We don't love the way it looks. This conversation came up here in our Accountants, Bookkeepers, and Business Owners group on Facebook the other day, where somebody asked if there were settings with respect to what the format of the report looks like when I export from QuickBooks Online to Excel. And the answer was no. In fact, if you go here and click on the Excel option, you don't even get, like the desktop version gives you a pop-up that gives you all kinds of options where you can choose a lot of things that have to do with what that report's going to look like once it gets to Excel. Here we don't have that option. It's a pretty plain export, and a lot of people would argue that the formatting isn't gorgeous. And the problem is we don't want to have to keep redoing this over and over again every time we export reports. So what we want, what somebody in our group suggested, which was a great suggestion, is record a macro and then use that macro. Now you have to do a different macro for each report because each report is a different sort of size and shape, if you know what I mean. But that's what you have to do in order to get this. And what I'd recommend is you create an Excel workbook that has all the macros one might use in order to format any of the different kinds of reports that you're in the habit of exporting from QuickBooks Online. So the first thing is you have to know how to set up Excel so that you can access the macros. And the answer is it's in this Developer tab here, which isn't available or there by default. So you have to right-click over here and choose Customize the ribbon. And on yours, where it says Developer here, it won't be checked off. It'll be blank. So you'll want to come in here and check that off. And that will enable you to access the Developer tab. Once you've got that tab, click on it, and over here is where you have all your macro stuff. Now the first thing you want to do is click off here where it says Use Relative References, because if you don't, then when you're recording the macro, Excel is going to track the very specific locations that you went to. And the whole point of this is we don't know what the shape of the report's going to be. I don't know how many lines it's going to take. So I need it to be relative because I need it to go down to the end of the report, wherever that might be. And as I go on, you'll understand, I think, better what that means if you don't already. So we have to check that option off. The next thing is I have to urge you to think ahead in terms of what the actions are going to be. In fact, what I would recommend is that you run through the process of formatting the report the way you want it, paying very careful attention to your actions so that you understand exactly what you want to do as soon as you hit this Record Macro options. Now, since I've already thought this through, I'm going to show you what I did in order to create a macro that will have your report looking like this, which I think is much more gorgeous than the other one. So we're going to hit Record Macro, and I'm going to name it. And the name has to be very simple, no special characters, no spaces. So let's just call it PL QBO. Leave it at that, PL QBO, right? For P&L QuickBooks Online. Click OK, and now it's recording. Notice the option here says Stop Recording. The first thing is we don't want to assume that the person who's using this is going to be starting off on cell A1. So even though we're already there, I'm going to record that action. And since I've set Excel to use relative references, here's where I have to be very specific. And I want to use the goto command, which is F5. And then in the reference, I'm typing a very specific reference, so that sort of overrides the relative references. And I wanted to say use cell reference A1. Let's go to reference A1. This way I know for sure that whether the person started on cell K15 or Z48, it doesn't matter. Before it does anything else for this purpose, we're going to get him right where we want him to be, which is cell A1, the very home cell on the spreadsheet. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is we want to highlight the whole spreadsheet to give it that background gray that I did. Now, I've done a little bit of trial and error. If you use Control-A, which does select the whole spreadsheet, or if you click this little guy here, which does select the whole spreadsheet, for some reason, the way Excel records the macro, that doesn't work. So take my word for it, so you don't have to go through the trial and error that I went through, and you will, in some cases, have to go through some trial and error to figure out what actions to record to get the desired result. It's just, that's the way it is. So let's hit Control Spacebar to highlight the entire columns. And I've got some merged cells here. That's why going to A1 brought me into actually A and B. And then Control Shift right arrow will actually highlight the rest of the spreadsheet. Then I go to my Home tab, and I choose the gray, and then I want to choose a font color. So I choose the color. Now I'm done. So again, now I'm going to press Control Home, and that automatically gets me to the home cell. and then control down arrow once, down arrow again, gets me to the top of the range where there's data. This is getting me to the area that I want to now remove the background color from so that it sort of stands out. Control shift down arrow, shift right arrow. And then over here on my formatting, no fill. And then, this is my own preference. You can format it however you like. This is just what I like to do. So I give it that box border, and then I can say control home, and I've got it formatted the way I want. I can even, at this point, since I went home, I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, since I know it's always going to be 4 down from the top, and put the word account in there so I have a proper heading. And then I can, control B to bold it so it's consistent with the way the total is formatted. So let's go back over to developer and let's click stop recording. And now let's test our macro to make sure that it's working properly. So I'm going to move this spreadsheet onto my other screen. And let's do a new export. And we'll open it up. So here's a nice new clean export looking exactly the way it did before. And as long as I've got the workbook that's got the macros in it open, I can run them on this one. So let's go to developer. Let's go to the macros button here, which brings up the list of any and all macros we have access to. Notice it's showing me macros in all open workbooks. And I'm going to choose run. And boom, in less than 2 seconds, I have my P&L formatted exactly the way I want. And that, my friends, is how you can use a macro to automate this process. You can now use this on any P&L from any QuickBooks Online company file, and it will work. If you have any questions, as always, please comment on the video or on the blog post, wherever you may be. If you're on the video on YouTube and you'd like to read the blog post, we have lots of pretty screenshots in there, then please check the description for the link that will take you right over to the blog. And for that matter, and in general, if you're on YouTube, visit us at toolegit2audit.com or schoolofbookkeeping.com, which is our main homepage and website. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you on the web.